We're going to start building an API using Node. We'll use Fastify as our web framework. Our data persistence layer, we're going to use MongoDB and Mongoose to be able to interact with that. And we'll use .env to be able to manage our environment variables. The API we're going to build is going to serve a project management tool that we're building. It will have a user model, which will have these fields, with role being one of these. It'll have a project, where the project manager ID will be a user, and where team members will be an array of users. It'll have tasks, which have these statuses, and it'll have comments. We're going to start from a blank folder and start scaffolding our application. I'll initialize with npm init-y, which will create my package.json file over here, and I'll install some libraries. I'm going to install Fastify, which is going to be my web framework. I'll install Mongoose, which I'm going to use to interact with my database, and .env, which I'll use to manage my environment secrets. Node gives us freedom on how we lay out our application. But with great freedom comes great responsibility. So let's think about how we might do that. I'm going to create an src folder where I'm going to put all my source code. And inside of here, I'm going to make 3 directories. First, I'll create my controllers directory where all my business logic is going to live. I'll create my models directory where all my data models are going to exist. And I'll create my routes where I'll map my incoming route to the correct controller. On the top level of my src folder, I'll create an app.js. For this video, we're going to focus on the user resource. And we're going to create full CRUD functionality for that. I'll import Fastify using common.js, and I'll instantiate it with the logger. I'll also import Mongoose. And my last import for this file will be my .env. I'll require it, and I'll trigger its config method. Now that will search for a file called .env, where I can keep any secret variables, but I want to make sure they are not committed to source control. So I will add a .gitignore, and I'll add .env to my gitignore file. What I'll want to do here is I'll want to import my routes, connect to my database, and then start my server. So let's import my routes. And I'm going to get those from the routes/user.routes file. That doesn't exist, so let's go create that. user.routes.js. Now the role of this file is to map my routes to my controllers. So I'll import my controllers at the top, and that's going to be found one directory up in the controllers directory in user.controllers. Again, that file doesn't exist yet, but we'll create that in a minute. To be able to map routes in Fastify, I'll create an async function called routes, which will receive the Fastify object and any options that exist. And now I want to do my CRUD functionality. I want to say fastify.get on the route. I want that to be my user controller.get all users. Fastify.get with an ID, and we do dynamic IDs with :id, much like Express if you've used that before. User.controller, that's going to be get user by ID. And I'm using the methods here that I'm going to create in my controllers file in a little bit. Next, I'll do fastify.post, where I want to create a new user. So user controller.create user. I want to update the user, so fastify.put. And that's going to be with the ID, so :id. And that's going to be user controller.update user. And lastly, I'll want to delete. And that will be with the ID. That'll be my user controller.delete user. The bottom of the file then, I will just export that routes function so it can be imported back in my app.js. Now I need to write my controllers. So let's create user.controller.js. And then here, I'm going to use the user model, which again doesn't exist, but it's going to be a models user.model. So Fastify will accept an async function, which will receive the request and the reply. And I'm going to do a try catch. If there is an error, I'll reply with a status of 500, and I'll send that error back again. For now, I'm just going to reply and send not implemented yet. So I want to do that for each of the methods mentioned here. So get user by ID, create user, update user, and delete user. The bottom of the file then, I'll do module.exports and export each of those methods again. So get all users, get user by ID, create user, update user, and delete user. For now, let's comment on this model, go back to our app.js and connect up our routes. So we will fastify.register, and we'll register our user routes, and we'll register them with a prefix. And our prefix will be API version 1 users. We'll start with an async function, and we'll try catch. In our try, we will await fastify.listen, and we'll listen either on process.env.port, if that's been defined, or 5000. And then we'll log fastify.log.info server is running. Server is running on port, and there's a Fastify method for that, fastify.server.address, which will have a port. We'll invoke our function at the bottom, and let's try it. So we'll do node source app.js. Oh, forgot to require this. Try again. Okay, so we've got some logging going on. And then if we check each of our routes, so localhost 5000 / API version 1 users. Not implemented yet. Okay, so something's wired up anyway. We've got the right thing coming in, and we're wiring it up. Let's create our model, connect to our database, and then we're almost there. So user.model.js. I'm going to require Mongoose here. And I'm going to create my user schema. So MongoDB is schemaless document database, but Mongoose allows us to have an in-code schema so that we can have validation and make sure the data that we have is right. So I'll create a user schema from the new mongoose.schema. This takes a definition. So if I go back here, I've got user ID. That's going to be handled internally. First name, last name, email, role, password, and role. So let's have a look at this. So I have first name, which will be of type string, and required. And I'll trim it, which will remove any white space from the start or the end. That's going to be the same for the last name. I'll copy this down again for the email. But for the email, I'll also want to check that it's unique. I don't want two users that have the same email address. And I'll make sure everything's lowercase, just to make it a bit tidier. And lastly, I'll have a role. So role in this case will be a string, but it's going to be one of a particular type. So I can pass in an enum. And the roles that I cared about were admin, project manager, and team member. So let's fix those. So admin, project manager, and team member. And I'll set a default here, rather than make it required, to team member. So once I've created my schema, I can instantiate my model. So I'll do const user equals mongoose.model, which takes the name that I want to call this, which is user, and the schema I want to use to build it, which is the user schema. And that's what I'm going to export below. Module.exports equals user. So this model is what will be used in our controllers. They'll import this and they will use our user.model to be able to access the database. But before that can happen, we need to connect our database. And again, we do this with Mongoose. So mongoose.connect, process.env, MongoDB _URI. Mongoose has been around for a while and they want to have backwards compatibility. So there are two options we need to pass in. use new URL parser. And we'll set that equal to true. And use unified topology. And we'll also set that equal to true. If you don't set those, you get a warning on the command line when you start up, and it'll just tell you that you need to. Console log connected to database, and we'll catch any error there. And we'll say that console log error connecting to database. We'll pass in that error. Okay, so let's restart our server. Error connecting to database. We can see the problem. We didn't have a MongoDB URI. So back over in my .env, I'll create a MongoDB URI. And I'm just using my local host. So I'll do MongoDB // localhost. And I will connect to on port 27017 normally. And we're connected to the database. Now we can implement our logic in our users controller. So to get all the users, we will get the users by awaiting user.find to find all of them, and then we'll send them. To get the user by ID, we'll get our user by const user equals await. Use our user model find by ID. We'll pass in rec.params.id. And then we'll send back that user. To create a new user, we'll get our user by creating a new user of the rec.body. We'll then get the result by saving our user, and we'll send back the result, which will then have the ID of the newly created user. This should say request and request. To remove the user, we'll await user.find by ID and delete. We'll pass in request.params.id, and we'll send back with the status of 203, which means no data, just an empty string. To update a user, we will await user.find by ID and update. We'll find a user with request.params.id. We'll pass in the request.body to be our updates. And we'll also pass an options object for new is true, which means we'll get the user object after our updates have been applied rather than before. And then we'll send our user back. So now I'll restart my server and I will create a request so that we'll test get users. We'll do that with localhost 5000/API version 1 and users. Empty array because there are no users. That makes sense. Let's duplicate this and we will create user. So we will post now to HTTP localhost 5000 API version 1 and users. I'm going to post and it's going to tell me the object. If I get my users, because this says error and this says error. Let's fix that and restart. Okay, if I create my user, I get, if I try to create a user, I get a crashed server again. Okay. So I'll try to create a user now. User validation field, email path is required. Okay, so let's fix that. So I'll go to body, raw, JSON, and I want the email. So I'll set my email to be test@test.com. Last name and first name are required. So last name tester, first name testy. Great, we get the object back again. It defaulted to team member. And if we get all the users now, then that user's back again. They have an ID here. So I can use that then to get that particular user. So let's duplicate this. And we will, do HTTP localhost 5000 API version 1 users and that ID. We got a particular user, Brill. So that's get our user. We want to update our user. So duplicate this. We want to update our user. So localhost, want to update. So it's post, and let's set the body to raw JSON. And we can set the role to admin, and that's updated. Brilliant. So save that one. And lastly, we want to delete our user. So let's duplicate again, and we want to delete our user. So we've created full CRUD functionality for this part of our API, our user here. In our app.js, we're importing Fastify, Mongoose, and our environment variables. We're importing our routes, connecting to our database, registering our routes, and then starting our server. In our routes, we're mapping our routes to our controller methods for this particular resource. In our controller methods, we're importing our model, and then we are using that model to find all the users, find the IDs, create a user, update a user, and delete, and then exporting it. And in our model, we're creating our schema, instantiating our model, and exporting that. This is a full CRUD functionality for this part of our API. It's not done. There are lots of things we need to add to this API. Obviously, we need to add other resources and their connections. We need to add some authentication or authorization, so not anyone can create things or delete things. And we want to add some testing as well. We'll dive into some of those in future videos. All the code for this project will be available in the repo, which I'll link below. Comment below if there are any questions you had that we haven't covered. Otherwise, see you in the next video. See ya.